Hello, my friends. In this video, we will be taking a look at the autosomal DNA results, predicted phenotype traits, and G25 results of a Yamnaya sample from Kalmykia. Actually, if you look at the map, this is Rostovskaya Oblast, but they are labeled as Yamnaya Kalmykia. I suppose because Kalmykia is so nearby located, like Kalmykia is right here, Rostovskaya Oblast is right here, so it's right on the border with Kalmykia, but it is technically Rostovskaya Oblast. So I think maybe they could rename the sample to Yamna Rostovska. Anyway, so this sample is dated to, let's look at the time period where this sample, so I think it's early Bronze Age, but to be more precise, the sample is 33 to 26 centuries before the Common Era, so that's early Bronze Age in Eastern Europe. And the mitochondrial lineage of the sample is U5, and the Y-DNA of the sample, you can see with my trait predictor, is R1b, very common lineage for Western Europeans today. So the R1b in Western Europeans, it came into Western Europe from Yamnaya. It came into Western Europe from the Western Steppe Herders who sort of colonized Europe during the Bronze Age, came into Europe and plundered and completely killed off the farmers who inhabited Europe before. Now, this individual from Yamnaya, his exact subclade of R1b, we can determine it is R1B-M269. RM269 is actually the lineage that is ancestral to L51, which is the most common lineage in Western Europe. So this individual is directly ancestral to um, most individuals in Western Europe, which is very, very, very interesting. Now we're going to look at what he scores with my trait predictor Nashakot, what his traits and health is. We are going to start with Nashakot, where he scores actually hazel eye color at 45.8% likelihood. Followed by that is brown eyes at 28% likelihood. Followed by that is blue eyes with a neighbor center at 15 or 14.5% likelihood, which is very, very interesting, which is very high for somebody of Yamnaya ancestry. This is, by the way, a pretty high quality sample, but if you look at the light color variants in HERC2 region, not a lot of variants are found here. However, we can make a couple assumptions based on the variants that are here. For example, not having this genotype implies he probably does not have blue eye haplotype 2. Having this genotype implies he probably does have blue eye haplotype 1. Having a couple of other genotypes here, like this, for example, implies he also probably does have blue eye haplotype 1 and this one as well. This is also quite predictive of blue eye haplotype 1. Um, Now, this is very, very interesting because this is predictive of a rather dark pigmentation. So I do want to see what this sample scores with SNP3. It is probably going to be brown or hazel. I am not expecting it to be blue whatsoever. So SNP3, in fact, I'm going to expect it to be brown. SNP3 is probably going to say that this individual has brown eyes, but we will check in a couple seconds. So with hair color, he is scoring dark brown hair. And with skin color, he's actually scoring white skin. So with my trait predictor, SNP3 aside, with my trait predictor, he is scoring white skin, dark brown hair, and hazel eyes, which is very, very white for somebody from the early Bronze Age from Russia. Definitely very white coloring. This type of coloring maybe is common for French people or people of Central European ancestry. Hazel eyes, dark brown hair, and white skin. It's not even necessary. It's not even really Mediterranean because Mediterraneans generally do not have white skin. They generally have olive skin tone. And he is predicted to have wavy or curly or straight hair, but most likely wavy hair. And he is also predicted to have a snub-shaped nose, or rather snub than Greek-shaped nose. Very interesting. Now, okay, he does have two light color variants in these variations of SLC45A2, which is very, very interesting. This is a big part of what contributed to him scoring hazel eye color, actually. Um, and he does have two light color variants in these variations of Keto G, which also contributed to him scoring so light for skin color. And he does also have some variants for ginger hair and MC1R as well. So he's predisposed to ginger color of hair. Now let's look up what he scores for eye color with SNP3. This will be very, very interesting. I think it's going to be brown. I am expecting it to be brown, but we will find out. Yeah, and it is indeed brown. So with SNP3, he is scoring brown for eye color. And it's really because of this genotype right here, where he's got AA genotype. So because of this genotype right here, he's scoring brown. But And it's a really important genotype as well. It's like the blue eye haplotype 2 genotype. It's pretty important. But also you have to keep in mind that the data set in snpr 3 data, it's quite low. It's population size 500 256. It's very low population size. So you have to take this with a grain of salt. So snpr 3 data is not really the best for modeling. It's okay, but it's not the best. And snpr 3 can be quite good sometimes, but in other cases, my trait predictor most of the time will be much better. So in this case, I think this individual probably did have indeed hazel eyes instead of brown. Let's look at the phenotype oracle. And for the phenotype oracle, the closest phenotypes that show up for this sample are this, which is a um, coordinate phenotype, but with hazel eye color and with brown hair. The original coordinate phenotype has different hair color. It has blonde hair and blue eyes, but I changed it to have hazel eye color and brown hair. There's a couple of variations for coordinate phenotype in my trait predictor tool that you can score. The second closest phenotype this individual scores is the I think this is called the Celtic something, the Celtic Denariid or something like that phenotype, which is a Western European phenotype in theory, but I think it also can be found in Eastern Europe as well. And the third phenotype this individual scores is the Volgid phenotype, which is very, very interesting. Also, I would say this is a phenotype that comes quite stereotypical for Yamnaya samples. I would expect a lot of Yamnaya samples to score this as well. But also, all of this makes sense for Yamna. I mean, considering all this. And by the way, look at the distance. Look at the difference in distance. The distance for this one is very close. It's 0.535, whereas the distance to these phenotypes is so distant, 0.8804, 8029. So this is really close. This is a really close phenotype to this sample, and the closest to a mixture is actually a mixture of this plus this. So the closest mixture is just basically straight up 100% this coordinate Nordic phenotype with hazel eyes and brown hair plus itself. So that's the closest mixture for this sample. And every other mixture comes at much larger distance, which is very, very interesting to observe. Um, I mean, everything else here comes at a larger distance, which is very, very interesting. All right, so the closest, most likely this individual looked like this basically. Most likely the individual that this video is about looked like this on the left because it's a male, it's not a female. Most likely that's what this guy looked like. All right, let's look at the biomarkers. Jason, RISE550. All right, Jason has got higher levels of vitamin D, which is really good to see. Higher levels of LDL cholesterol, which is definitely bad. This type of elevated level of LDL cholesterol is really unhealthy to see. A lower level of HDL cholesterol, which is also bad as well. So for cholesterol, totally cooked result for cholesterol. He's got lower levels of glucose, which is good. Higher levels of hemoglobin, which is okay. Lower levels of blood pressure, which is good. Higher levels of iron in the blood, so he might have hemochromatosis variants. Let's look that up. No, he does not carry variants for hemochromatosis. So the slightly higher level for iron in the blood is not due to hemochromatosis variants. He's got lower level of sex hormone binding globulin in blood. He's got average level of red blood cell count in blood, and he's got average number of base pairs with telomere length, so average predisposition to lifespan. He's got slightly shorter predisposition to height, like 0.2 centimeters shorter, basically 2 millimeters shorter than average. I scored the same thing, and I'm 6 foot tall, so that's like, it doesn't say much about your height in reality. So he's probably around the same height as me, based on this prediction. But anyway, let's close that, and let's look at the polygenic risk scores. All right, we're gonna ignore everything that's really close to 1 and only look at the stuff that is distant from 1, stuff that is worthy of talking about. So he's got lower odds of arrhythmia nodosum. He's got high odds of hemoglobin E disease. I believe this is the main variant that my shape predictor looks for hemoglobin E disease. Wait. I believe this is the main variant. Yep, in rare diseases and trace panel. Yes, this is the main variant indeed. So it is in rare diseases and trace panels as well. There's 2 other variants that it looks for that are not on this panel, but they do show up on the hemoglobin disease risk score page as well. Okay, he's got lower odds of migraine. He's got average odds of lupus, which is very interesting. He's got above average odds for gout. He's got, let's see, lower odds of cataracts based on 1 S&P, so that's basically nothing. He's got lower odds of age-related macular degeneration. He's got higher odds of rheumatoid arthritis. He's got lower odds of Tourette's based on 3 S&Ps, so once again, not very good coverage. He's got higher odds of epilepsy based on 3 S&Ps, which is okay. Epilepsy, there's only like 6 or 5 S&Ps that in total that it looks for. For asthma, he's got average level of asthma. Actually, I think it's 6. I don't remember for sure. I think it's 6. He's got average odds for leukemia. He's got average odds for vitiligo. He's got higher odds for myopia, very high odds. Wow, very high odds for myopia. So definitely predisposed to myopia and nearsightedness. He's got lower odds for corneal astigmatism. He's got lower odds for stroke. Really good to see. He's got lower odds for atrial fibrillation. He's got lower odds for deep vein thrombosis, and he's got much lower odds for cardiovascular issues, which are here on this panel. So this takes into account the homocysteine and cardiovascular panels, which we'll look at in the result a little bit later. But from looking at this, we can assume that either both the cardiovascular and the homocysteine panel are really good, the results there are really good, or one of them is average and another one is really good. That's what we can assume from this result. He's got average levels of average odds for ADHD. He's got averages slightly below average odds for unipolar depression. He's got below average odds for bipolar, and he's got below average odds for schizophrenia. Really good to see. So he's got also lower odds of type 2 diabetes, and he's got also average odds of type 1 diabetes, and he's got also below averages for Alzheimer's, and he's got also below averages for multiple sclerosis. He's got 4 risk variants for breast cancer out of 10, which is pretty typical. He's got below averages for prostate cancer. He's got above averages for glioma, which is brain cancer, which is very interesting as well. We're going to look at the 8q24 panel in a couple seconds, in a couple minutes. He's got above averages for thyroid cancer as well, which is really, well, it's not 8q24, it's a different. It's not so much 8q24, but it's still there as well. It's near that panel. Blood cancers panel JAK2 gene. He does not have any risk variance for JAK2, but 0 found in file. Okay, so I guess nothing for that was found in the file. He's got 2 risk variants for testicular cancer out of 8. Wow, nothing here shows up for Kit G. Is that because he doesn't have any risk variants for Kit G, or is that because that's simply not in the file? So let's look that up in the file actually right now. No, that's because there is nothing in the Kit G, right? That's because the file doesn't have any information for that. That's why. So it's because it's a low quality file. That's why there is nothing for Kit G. I was about to say like what's up with that, but that's because there is no information for Kit G in the file. Okay. He's got 2 risk variants for celiac disease out of 4, which is pretty typical. He's got no risk variants for GSS. He's got 8 risk variants for Crohn's out of 14. None of them are marked as important, which is pretty good. And we don't see any other rare conditions. We see this for hypopastasia. So he is predisposed to hypopastasia. I think this might go on the thumbnail actually, because these are probably not miscalls. Because this right here is a homozygous call, and they are both located in the same region. So when you have miscalls, typically you're not gonna have 2 miscalls that are in the same region located right next to each other. This type of genotype is most likely a reflection of inheritance. And with miscalls, you are also not going to have homozygous. Sometimes you can have homozygous miscalls, but usually you're not going to have homozygous miscalls with these type of files. So in this case, I don't think it's a miscall. I think it's a genuine genotype that he has for hypopastasia. It's a risk variant for hypopastasia. So this probably will go in the thumbnail. I don't know. Hypopastasia is a very difficult word to spell. And people might not be attracted to it if I put it in a thumbnail, but it's a very real concern for this sample. Like homozygous for that it's a very real concern. So that's very interesting. He's got 1 risk variant for GCD, which is also uncommon. This might be a miscall, but I'm not gonna dwell on that for too much. Actually, you know what? Some of these might be miscalls actually, because there's too much rare stuff in this file. I'm seeing too much rare stuff in this file, to be honest. So even this might be a miscall for hypopastasia, because I'm seeing way too much rare stuff here, like this and this irritable bowel syndrome. This is a the homozygous call here. Like homozygous calls, typically you're not going to see homozygous miscalls, but maybe something about the genotyping process in this file was different, and that's why you have homozygous miscalls here. Maybe that's why. But that tripped me up. But I have a feeling that those are miscalls as well. Yeah. So actually, I'm not gonna put that in the thumbnail. This is not thumbnail worthy. This is just a case of uh subpar quality file rather than a thumbnail worthy discovery. Okay. But anyway, let's close that. And now let's move on to the monogenic traits. Now, for warrior versus warrior panel, he is scoring definitely much more of a warrior phenotype. So quicker dopamine reuptake, lower dopamine levels, and higher stress resiliency. This is a very interesting phenotype that he scores based on genotypes in COMT and MAOB region. He does not score anything for MAOA region, but looks like based on this here, and this here, he is scoring much more of a warrior phenotype. Okay, quite interesting. Of course, it would be very interesting to see what he would score if MAOA was included as well, because that might change the result drastically, but that's not in the file, unfortunately. For DRD2, he is scoring less D2 dopamine receptors at 52.9%, so lesser predisposition to such conditions as schizophrenia and bipolar. And he is scoring less D2 dopamine receptors at 53% without even having the TOC1 variant for reduced D2 receptor activation. So without even the TOC1 variant, he is scoring less D2 dopamine receptors. I think it's not activation, it's D2 density. But without even the TOC1 variant, he is scoring less D2 dopamine receptor density. And that is very, very interesting. Well, there's only one genotype that contributed to that, right? It's the no-go learner variant here, where he's got two derived no-go learner variants. So this file is just not very high quality, unfortunately. He does not have any dwarfism variants. And by the way, for Yamnaya samples, I am gonna cover all the highest quality samples I can get, but they are still not very high quality. All the samples I can cover, they are still not very high quality, even though they are the highest quality samples I can get. They are still not very high in terms of their quality. For insomnia disorder panel and sleep disorder, he's got the genotype which is uncommon, which leads to 7 times increased risk of DSPS, which is very, very interesting. But everything else is typical. And for 5-HT and serotonin, he's scoring higher or intermediate levels of 5-HT and serotonin. He does not have the genotypes for 5-HT TLPR in his file, so that's simply not in his file. But he does have these other genotypes in HTR2A, which lead to a most of the genotypes he has lead to a reduced risk of depression and anxiety and stuff like that. So that's pretty good. For autism, he is scoring higher level of autism. All right, based on a couple of SNPs. It's these 4 plus a couple of others from the rest of the panels, and some of them that don't show up in the panel. For lactose persistence, he does not score any variants. He does not. None of it is found in this file, so simply most of it is absent from the file. For OXTR and empathy, he is scoring higher level of empathy based on one SNP. So this one SNP, he's got a genotype for higher levels of empathy in this OXTR variation, which is most likely not East Asian in origin. So in OXTR, he's got this one variation which leads to higher level of empathy, and because of that, he's scoring higher level of empathy for the panel. We remember he was scoring lower for type 2 diabetes, but average for type 1 diabetes. And we see this genotype in HLA, which leads to 5 times the average of type 1 diabetes. So for HLA, we can expect perhaps a bad score for HLA, which is very interesting. But let's scroll back to the polygenic risk scores and see what he scores for lupus, for example. Lupus, he scores average. What about asthma? Because that's all related to HLA. HLA, he scores slightly above average. What about multiple sclerosis? Multiple sclerosis. Where is multiple sclerosis? Oh, here it is. Slightly below average. Okay. And now, what about type 1 diabetes? Slightly above average. So he is scoring it. We can't really know that. But oh, there's also the vitiligo. Where's vitiligo? I think it's easier if I look it up. And for vitiligo, he scores slightly. So we can't really know what he scores for the HLA gene just from this, but we're gonna find out in a couple of seconds. All right, we're gonna find this out. For Alzheimer's, he does not have any risk variants in APOE, which is really good to see. No risk variants for multiple sclerosis in HLA, which is really good to see, and he does have a rare genotype that also protects him from MS, which is really good as well. So multiple sclerosis, really good. For cardiovascular disease panel, he actually scores higher odds of cardiovascular issues. So from this, we already know that his genotype for the homocysteine panel must be really, really good. Really, really good results for the homocysteine panel, because we remember he was scoring below average for the odds of cardiovascular issues on the polygenic risk score page, and that takes the combined scores of cardiovascular issues panel plus the homocysteine panel. So because he's scoring badly for the cardiovascular issues panel here, he must be scoring really, really well on the homocysteine panel. So his homocysteine panel is probably looking very good. And from that, we can also draw the conclusion that the MTHFR genotypes are also quite healthy, because they are the biggest contribution to the homocysteine panel. And from that, we can also draw the conclusion that his CBS genotypes are also quite healthy. And from that, we can also draw the conclusion that he probably does not have any homocystinuria variants. But we can verify all that in a couple seconds. We can try to verify that in a couple seconds. But I just like making these little assumptions about the DNA tests, some DNA files I'm looking at, before I look at them in a couple, because it's the first time. Every time I record these videos, it's my first time reaction. Sometimes I look at stuff beforehand, but usually it's my first time reaction. I look at some things beforehand, but in this case, like health related stuff, it's my first time reaction always. So it's very interesting for me to record as I try to piece this together and determine what contributed to what from the file. It's very interesting. He's got 2 HLA risk variants for vitiligo and HLA-TRB1. So for HLA gene panel, we might expect to see some risks for autoimmune disorders, but really, I don't know, because he doesn't have any risk variants for HLA for multiple sclerosis. Also, no HLA-A risk variants for vitiligo as well, which also plays a big part. For facial morphology panel, he does not have any EDAR genotypes. He has a genotype for high rows of protruding nasal bridge, larger nose size, and thinner eyebrows. For miscellaneous section, he does not have micropenis, which is really good to see. He's got better performing muscles, likely sprinter rather than endurance athlete. And higher odds of obesity and major depressive disorder. That's very interesting. I never really talk about this variation on my channel. No variants for increased pain sensitivity in SCN9A, and for SCN9A, he's got no risk variants for pain hypersensitivity out of 4 total, which is really good to see. This is much less common than this one. The variants for pain hypersensitivity in here are pretty common. In this variation, it is considered like one of those really rare variants where if you do have them, it's probably because of a miscall. His risk of heart failure due to beta blocker medications is way below average, which is pretty good. He does not have any albino variants. He's also not a carrier of Melanesian blonde hair variants. He's not a carrier of any familiar Mediterranean fever mutation variants. And for MTHFR panel, he's got lower risk of various health issues and normal homocysteine levels for MTHFR. So MTHFR genotypes are looking good, just as I predicted, just as I had predicted. MTHFR genotypes are looking really good for this sample. Very, very easy prediction to make. For cancers panel, he's scoring lower odds of epithelial cancers, which is really good to see. Now, we remember he was scoring higher for glioma, but that is not because of 8q24. That is because of other genotypes in other genes that are not 8q24 that contribute to glioma. We remember he was also scoring higher for thyroid cancer, but that is also not due to 8q24. That is different. There is different region that's responsible for that, at least for the risk score, because I believe thyroid cancer is also an epithelial cancers, but the risk score, the way the risk score works, it is different. It is not calculated using 8q24. We can look at the 8q24 genotypes actually right now, and we see there's only 5 SNPs, and for these 5 SNPs, it looks like he's doing pretty good. He only has 1 risk genotype, and the rest of them are good. All right. For leukemia, he's got good genotypes here. Only 1 risk variant here, and the rest lead to lower odds of leukemia. Really good to see. For rare diseases and traits panel, he's got. Let's see. I don't see anything actually. Higher odds of eosinophilic esophagitis. That's a rare condition. All right. He's got 2 risk variants for celiac disease in IL-18R1, but he doesn't have any risk variants in HLA. Unfortunately, that stuff is not in the file. It doesn't show up on the screen because it's not in the file. Okay, he doesn't have none of the genotypes relevant to AR panel are showing up in the file as well. That's not in the file. No risk variance for Canavan syndrome and no risk variance for Crohn's disease. Really good to see. For HIV and AIDS panel, he got 2 protective variants in HLA-C, which is really good, which is to 90% reduction in HIV viral load. Let's look at the HLA gene panel. He's scoring lower odds of autoimmune disease. That's sort of what I expected, but I didn't want to say it because I might be wrong. But let's see it, the results. So it looks like he's got good genotypes in HLA-A, both good genotypes, and HLA-B, both good genotypes. HLA-C, he's got good genotypes here, and HLA-D, he only really has these 2 genotypes here, which lead to higher odds of type 1 diabetes and vitiligo, which kind of spoil the result. But these are the only genotypes in the whole gene region that are negative. Everything else is positive. So because of that, the result overall is really good. For CBS panel, he's got all the genotypes for lower levels of homocysteine. He also does have genotypes for higher levels of homocysteine, but they are lesser impact. And no variance for homocystinuria, just as I predicted. And he is scoring indeed 48% for lower homocysteine levels, just as I predicted. So that's exactly what I expected to see with this result. Okay, for muscular dystrophy myopathy, he's scoring no risk variance for that. No risk variance for ADL either. Really good to see. Color blindness panel, he's got no risk variance for color blindness in OPN1SW. For FTO gene panel, he's got intermediate or lower odds of obesity based on 1, 2, 3, 4 SNPs. For syncope panel, based on 4 SNPs, he's got average odds of syncope. And for biotraits panel, he's got weird earwax or normal or smellier body odor and normal colostrum, which is typical for non-East Asians. Yes, that's right. East Asians actually have a genotype here that leads to a slightly less smelly body odor and dry earwax, which is really crazy to find out. And he also has 2 copies of the farmer CLT-CL1 gene variant, which leads to a selective advantage in processing carbohydrate-rich diets, presumably those with lots of sugar. And for blood group panel, he's actually scoring blood type B. His blood type is most likely blood type, let me zoom in. His blood type is most likely blood type B at 49.5%, followed by that is blood type AB at 36.4%, followed by that is blood type O, and he probably does not have blood type O. He probably has blood type A, and he probably does not have blood type O. So he most likely has blood type B or AB, and that's pretty much it for his blood type. Now, thanks for watching my video until the very end. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe in case you enjoyed my video. And check out the description of the video. In the description, you will find a lot of really cool stuff, links to buy my software that you can use to generate trade reports just like this one, links to buy a report, which costs a lot less than the software, and links to buy the DNA result, the DNA kit of the sample that I analyzed in this video. All that will be in the description of the video. So thanks for watching. Make sure you check out the description. Goodbye.